friend Phil, we have an amazing guest on this week's episode. And she's a very good friend of mine, not someone I've known for a long time, but I think it's been about a year ago. She reached out to me on LinkedIn, of all places, and I think we met in some other networking groups and whatnot. She said, come to my event. You have to come check this out. And she's been doing these quarterly events for a long time, and they're so fun. Kindra Maples from Culture Crush Business is on the pod this week, and I couldn't be more excited. How are you, Kindra?
I am so good, and I'm so excited to be on here with you guys. Is that really how we met? I just boldly was like, hey, come to my event.
I think it was, yeah. I mean, we met through Local First.
Okay. I knew there were maybe a couple other pieces up there as well. And I wasn't just like boldly like, hey.
Well, you are bold, and that did work. And you have a big personality, and we all love it. You keep everyone smiling, and you're just a great person. I'm glad you did that, because that was the nudge I needed, apparently, to get to your event, and it was a blast.
I love that. Well, I'm so glad. I feel like that was the adult version of when a kid says, hey, do you want to be my friend? And we don't.
Perfect.
Right? We don't really do that anymore. We don't have these moments of, hey, do you want to be my friend? I see what you do and you see what I do. And I know there's connection. Let's be friends. I feel like that was the professional way to be like, hey, Steven, do you want to be my friend?
Yeah. And I gladly said yes. And we've been hanging out ever since. So I'm excited for you to be on. And I know Phil has gotten to know you through your podcast, of all places, because I know that was a big catalyst to your start and what you're doing now, which we'll get into. But give us a little background, where you started, where you came from, what you're up to.
It started a long time ago. My mom met my dad. But I won't go into the whole thing. But my background actually is in animal behavior and husbandry. So my background was actually in training animals. And it shifted over time from training animals to training people. Side note, they're all the same. And
real quick, let me interrupt you real quick. We're not talking about We're not talking about dogs and cats here. We're talking like zoo animals.
Yes, polar bears, baboons, tortoises, lions, alligators, anteaters. We're all on the docket. Yeah.
Wow.
So not your typical dogs and cats, which is really funny. I feel like I should have been able to train my dogs better because of my background. And they, just like every other dog that people own, they run the house. So
this is true.
It is what it is. But yes, that was my background. And then I shifted from training animals to training people. And I realized that connection is really where I thrive. And yes, I do love animals, and I'm still a huge animal lover. But I really found my space when it came to training people and helping them develop themselves. What could I give them, and how could I support them to be the best versions of themselves? And sometimes it was structured training, and sometimes it was just, hey, I need someone that will listen to me, and I could be that person to listen to them. And so then fast forward, we moved back to Arizona. I've been in Arizona for about 7 years now. When I moved back to Arizona, I was working with a couple of other different companies at the time. And I had a company I was working for, and my boss threw a chair across the room.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. Steven, you know, in that payroll HR space, right? I was just like,
this is
I
not
don't have
okay.
to do this. Yeah. So I stepped aside, started my podcast during COVID. Everyone does weird things during COVID, and I did that and had no idea.
Are you saying podcasting is weird, Kindra? I mean, I think it's pretty cool.
It is very cool, and it was not in my space, in my realm at all. I've done PR and news and presentations and all of those things, but nowhere was podcasting a thing for me. And I was just like, hey, let's try it. And so I did it. And it's all focused on company culture, bringing in company leaders, and bringing in the resources like you, Steven, right? That help build a good culture. And then about a year into it, individuals and companies were reaching out to me directly saying, hey, do you have a resource for diversity and inclusion? Hey, do you have a resource for mental health in the workplace? And all of these other areas. And it was like, well, yes, I do. So then it was really understanding and acknowledging that there was a gap in what we have as our resources when it comes to company culture. There is no place for folks, well, there wasn't until now, to just go to when they needed that support, when they needed that resource, right? Backtrack to when I was working with my staff and training them and working with animals. Same thing. All they needed was sometimes an ear and sometimes a resource. And in this culture space, they're scattered everywhere. So I've essentially brought them all together, not all of them, but we now have over 200 different partners that we work with. And we get to go in and work with companies and then find that match for them. So if I'm working with a company and I see that mental health is a really big area, guess what? My area of mental health would probably be have a glass of wine and a bowl of mac and cheese. Probably not the right solution. And that's why I have folks like you and others to come in that mental health space, just as one example. So that's where I am now, is just building this hub of resources to truly connect companies to the solutions that they need so that they can build a thriving company and they can build thriving humans.
You're like the Angie's List of HR.
Yes.
You're the master connector.
People have told me that. And I'm like a culture broker. Somebody called me the other day.
Oh,
I
like that.
love this.
I like that.
Yeah. So that's where I am.
When Stephen brought up the idea of having you on the podcast, which was a no-brainer given your story, I got so excited because the concept of culture, when Stephen and I started in the workforce, we had a culture at MasterTax, but we didn't talk about it. You know, we had the KPASA meetings and we had great culture, but we didn't talk about it as a sector of the business. And so as I transfer over to the startup software world, where I feel like culture really catapulted, originally I thought of it as, you know, oh, we've got a ping pong table and there's catered lunch and there's no one has more fun than us is something that the CEO always said. And these are all parts of it. But it really came to realize that that was the secret sauce and the value of Workiva. And a couple of the quotes, like Simon Sinek says, customers will never love a company until the employees love it first. And that prioritization of the employee, even over the customer, like hit me. This was a couple of years into working at Workiva, but figuring out what was so special was definitely the reason we were able to start and get things done. So I'd love your perspective on, am I off there on culture kind of, from your perspective, do you think it really did expedite in the SaaS software space? Was it in other areas, or when did you think it started becoming a business term?
Ooh, that is a very good question, because if you and I and Stephen had this conversation 10 years ago, right? 15 years ago, I think of somebody like my dad working. My dad was a frame technician. He was the body man when you wrecked your car. He was the one that measured it all back to where it was supposed to be and then fixed the framework. Never once did my dad and I ever have a conversation about him feeling seen and heard and safe or anything like that in the workplace. And now these are conversations that we have. And you mentioned the lunches and the pool table and things like that. And those are a piece of it, right? And the other part of it are a lot of these unseen and unspoken areas when it comes to culture. And so I feel like it's built up over the last few years. Honestly, COVID shot everything we knew about culture and being in an office freaking out the window, right? So many companies had been told for so long, you have to be in the office to do your job. And then all of a sudden we're like, hey, guess what? The whole world, go work from your house while your kid is there and you're doing laundry. And we did it just fine, right? So then as you shift back and now it's like, oh, we're back in the office. Everyone's like, I did this just fine, right? And so COVID really gave us the opportunity to push the limits, right? COVID obviously wasn't a good thing, but in the space of culture, It kind of was, because it helped us push the limits a little more and realize what we could and couldn't get away with.
Yeah.
And so now I just love that in all different industries, we can have this conversation about culture, about people, and there's more metrics behind it now. And so to your question, right, as far as like with the data side of things, we have metrics and data that we can put towards this. Whereas, again, 10, 15 years ago, culture was a very fluffy thing. And, oh, I have lunches, or my boss gave me tickets to this thing. Whereas now we have metrics and data to show that it directly relates and affects the people, their engagement, the retention, the recruitment, the marketing, all of those areas. So it's been a beautiful journey, I think, from my perspective of seeing all of this shift, even over the last 5 years in particular.
Yeah. And let's double click on this, because I had a specific question around this. As we've all gone through it, what are some of the companies that were successful in staying remote and maintaining culture? Because I think there was a lot of burnout in regard to virtual happy hours, which is funny to look in hindsight, but there were a lot of them. But what were some of the things that were done well before we could get back in person to maintain that culture from your perspective?
The intention behind it, right? So understanding the intention behind all the things that we're doing. Instead of just having a meeting just to have a meeting, or doing the happy hour just to say that we're connecting, right? Really understanding the intention behind it. The companies that understood, hey, my team has already been on Zoom all day long, and now I'm going to have them stay another hour so that we can do a happy hour. But yet I know that they're home and they have kids at home and they have to get dinner ready and laundry, and there's dogs barking. I can't tell you how many cats I've seen, their little butts walking across the screen, right? And so the leaders that came at it from the perspective of intention and the human factor and just understanding what was happening, they were the ones who didn't do all of those happy hours and things like that, but maybe they did something different. I know a company that did a big monthly all hands, and they mailed boxes to all of the employees' houses before they did it. And in the box, it had all kinds of activities and drinks and snacks and things, so that when they were in that video kind of happy hour presentation interactive setting, it was almost like they were there because they had all of this really great stuff. It was planned ahead and it was intentional, right? And then I add this human piece to it. The leaders that understand that we're not robots, we are humans, they just get it at a different level, which it's fascinating to me, because literally that's what HR stands for, is human resources.
There is that word.
Oh
is
my
in
goodness.
There.
And
yes.
And companies just kind of forget that we are human, and that we had our kids home, and that we were losing our minds, and that we needed to go for walks and all of these things. And then fast forward to now we've done the virtual. Now we're back in the office. Now what I see for leaders is, if they understand the difference between productivity and connection, you can't tell your staff you want them to be in the office because of productivity. The reality is, we've seen that they've done just fine while also sweeping their floors during calls. So now we are building these workspaces to connect people. My next event is held with Goodman's Interior Structures. They're an ideal example of this. They literally sell office furniture, and they do not require their staff to come into the office.
Right.
Mind-boggling to me.
Wow.
Yes. It's really cool that you painted that picture, because we launched our payroll business here in Phoenix in 2017. COVID hits 3 years later, right? So we were a small team.
Yeah.
And it was like our first go as entrepreneurs, right? It was a franchise payroll business. We had some support from our team in Fort Collins, but we were the only location outside of Fort Collins. We all were trying to figure this out. And so, we tried these virtual happy hours, because I thought that's what we're supposed to do. Like, I don't know.
We all tried that. Don't feel bad.
Right. We all just are trying to figure out what works, and we're trying to grow, but we did figure out none of our clients knew. There was no difference in their processing or what we did, whether we were in the office or not. We got lucky because our lease ended that year as well. We just didn't renew and then found a new space in 2021. So we were blessed in that regard. But we learned that when we came back, it was never full times. We built out a hybrid work from home schedule for our staff, and we built out, now we do bi-weekly 3-day weekends for everybody. And it's just built a human aspect to schedules, and we got a team that can cover each other. And we learned that as leaders. It's like, hey, yeah, payroll doesn't stop. It goes every single day. We're running payrolls, right? And we get called, but it doesn't mean everybody has to be in the office or on the phones. We just need people in the office and on the phone, but not the entire organization. So that's what we learned. And then we do a quarterly event and do stuff together as a team and all that kind of stuff. But I think the flexibility of the work week is what we were taught. And I know some, 4-day work weeks are starting to become popular and all that stuff too. So that's a whole nother dynamic of figuring out how that works. And it's tough as a leader trying to figure out what works for your organization. But I did want to talk, you mentioned your event at Goodman's. We got all of our office furniture at Goodman's, by the way. So shout out to Goodman's off Indian School. And the event that you do, though, you do bring connection and you bring people. And so I wanted you to talk about that a little bit. Why did you start these events? Where did they come from? Where did the idea come from? And what's the impact you've been making?
I love this question because, like a lot of really great things, it happened by accident. I had no intention of doing events. I've done events in my past. So I've always been the one with the strategic mindset and that operations view of run a show and who is where and what are the things we need. I never thought that would be part of Culture Crush business and what I'm doing now. And so over a year ago, I had the opportunity to partner with a company, Culture Amp, big international company, started in Australia and now very based in the US as well, focused on the employee engagement connection side. I had the opportunity to partner with them, and they actually flew out one of their executives. He spoke at the event and then was on my podcast the next day. It was awesome. And at the event, and I guess I should preface too, with partnering, there was this idea of it was this mutual partnership and we were going to get some brand exposure for both of us. My brand, their brand, right? At the event, I was looking around and I'm like, wow, these are all my people. Like, these are all my people that I know. How great is this? It's kind of like bringing all my friends together for a culture party. And then at the end of it, so many people came up to me and they were like, Kindra, this was so great. It had a culture of its own. When's the next one? And I just went, oh, shit.
Oh, shoot. I got to find another one.
I was like, I gotta make this a thing now. And so at that point, I was like, okay. And so I met with Arizona Wilderness Brewing. They were the partner that I had for that first event. I met with Jonathan, one of the co-founders, and he said, hey, let's do this. We'll commit to be your venue partner for the next year for quarterly. And I was like, okay, let's do it. And so since then, it's been a quarterly event. The structure of the event is very intentional. We preface, it's not this roulette of business cards games. It is very much you show up as your authentic self. You connect with people as people. In the conversation, of course, it's going to come out of what you do and what your business is and how you can support each other. But that's not what you're leading with. If you lead with the question of, hey, Phil, do you own a bearded dragon? Might sound bizarre, but it'd be amazing. You'd be amazed how that can start the conversation instead of starting it with, hey, Phil, what do you do for work, right?
Or how's the weather in your area if you're remote?
Yes.
Drives me up a wall.
Yes. And so finding those unique and different ways to start and ignite the conversation. So we start with connection in the beginning. There's always some teaching component in the middle of it. So whether we've done fireside chats, panels, facilitated activities, and then at the end, it's connection again. And usually at the end is when you've been like, okay, we've kind of talked, and then you kind of do the, hey, what is it that you actually do? How can we help each other, right? And so they're structured like that, all of them. And they have really grown so that the audience is a beautiful mix of resources that can help improve company culture and just people in general, right? A lot of the resources we have aren't necessarily just for leaders to tap into for culture, but they're for individuals to tap into. We just shared one the other day for sound bath healing event. Yes. How rad is that, right? And so sharing those resources, and then being able to have that opportunity for it to be those resource folks, some HR folks, some small business leaders, some CEOs of some pretty big companies looking how to improve their culture. And then it's been really fun lately too. I'm seeing this small group of folks that are looking for new jobs. And they're kind of scoping out who's in the area, who are the leaders in the room looking to improve their culture. That's who I want to go work with. Right? So that's been a really beautiful piece of this. And
I've been to a couple of them. They're great. They're a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is the first one we're doing in a different location. So we've actually outgrown the space with Arizona Wilderness, which is why we're switching it up and doing this next one with Goodman. So this is another big step for us with the community, which is really fun. Yeah.
You did a great series on the podcast, or a portion of it, on coaches and consultants. Really enjoyed the conversation you had with Michael DeShalit I may have mispronounced his name, but big hypnosis fan here and passion. So I loved that. But the reason I bring up that series is what's become evident as well is matching cultures with the companies that you're partnering with as well. And if we're Kiva, we have a lot of third-party partners that are doing the software deployments for us. And it's become so clear how the culture matchup from a partnership perspective means a ton as you're bringing in consultants. Because even if you have the competency and the technical skills, if your communication with the client has to be so spot on, and it may be common sense for some of the listeners, but that fact that you're matching cultures in every business organization, it's not just the internal results for your org, but how those mesh and overlap are such a key driver to how effective you're going to be going to market. So was curious your perspective there, because I got a little bit on that coaching consulting, even though they were individuals, but as businesses come together, what are some of the big things that you see happening from a leadership perspective to make sure that those engagements get kicked off on the right foot and the cultures align?
Yeah. So I'm going to answer that two ways. One, I love that you mentioned this about coaches and consultants. When I started to build this hub of resources, there was a moment where I had a couple of coaches come to me and they were kind of concerned that there was competition of how do I get set apart from everybody else if we have all these resources, and then when it comes to the coaching and the consulting side, there's a handful that we refer and recommend, but how do we differentiate them? And the reality is they differentiate themselves because they are all unique and different. And to your question, Phil, they're going to be a right match for some companies and maybe not a right match for others. So some of the coaches and the consultants that we partner with, some are men, some are women, some will work virtually, some are in person. We're looking at regions. So there might be somebody here in Arizona and they want their coach to be in person. Well, what about Texas? They want their coach to be in person. Okay, well, I'm not going to match them with the coaches I have in Arizona, right? And so there really is this beautiful way where we can go through the resources that we have. We can take over 200 resources and 30 different coaches and consultants, and we can narrow them down to be able to say, okay, Phil, I think I've narrowed down the 2 best matches for you. And then you get to meet both of them and then see who really is the right fit. But you don't have to go through the struggle of looking through all of them. If some of them are going to be an automatic, nope, not a fit, right? It's very similar, I feel like, to an interview.
Recruiting. I was just thinking finding a new person. Yeah.
Right? I'm narrowing them down so that the two of you don't have to interview 30, 40 different people.
Oh, it's brutal.
You just focus on, right?
Yes.
You just focus on 2. And so I I love that you say that about the coaches and the consultants. And even if you're looking bigger than that, right? We have 8 different areas that we focus our resources on, from mental health and wellness to diversity and inclusion, accessibility, professional and personal development. And even with resources that fit into a same bucket per se, their focus is going to be different, right? Like Stephen, with you in this mindfulness space, that's beautiful as a resource for some of our companies. And there might be a particular mental health situation that a company is dealing with that I might have a different match that even aligns more, or vice versa, right? So all of these different resources and matches, and really lining them up the right way. There's this recruitment culture matching side that's part of all of that.
Yeah, is that part of your process, is finding as many resources as you can to kind of have them in your Rolodex, if you will? Or do you look for who are my top 3 or 4 and that's all I'm going with because I know I can trust them? Or are you trying to build out kind of like this Angie's List type style of like, who can I use? Because you're going to have people, I don't know for sure, primarily I would imagine right now is Arizona, but you probably have people all across the country that are reaching out, and that can continue to grow. So resources locally in other areas are going to be important. So is that part of your strategy as you continue to grow and finding who are constantly seeking out those professionals in various spaces?
Yes. So building this hub means building the resources. I'm essentially everyone's cheerleader, their salesperson, their marketing person, their culture recruiter person, right? To be able to connect the businesses on one side with the resources they need on the other side. And so while, yes, we have some phenomenal companies and some of them we tap into more frequently, the goal is to really continue to reach, and so that we can truly build the resources in every single region. And so then maybe the right match for a company doesn't have to be virtual. We can say, hey, we have that match that's in your area, that's close to you. And so really building that resource hub. And there are some that we tap into a little more frequently, depending on the need. There are a couple of hot topic areas, I guess I could say, kind of buzzword areas that come up in a lot of conversations with company leaders and executives. That is usually the starting point of where they need some help and some support. And so there's some areas that we'll tap into, a lot of diversity and inclusion, a lot of mental health and wellness is what I've seen a lot of lately.
Is there a certain size of client where you start seeing that? Like a certain size? Do you see it from all aspects? Like, ooh, I'm a startup, 2 or 3 employees, all the way to I've got thousands of employees and I need some resources. It could be anywhere in between.
Every level in between. Yep. Yeah. When we're working with teams, we have kind of a size that about 10 to 40 is a beautiful size of company or team that we'll break it up into when we're working with groups. But as far as some of these topics that come up over and over, the diversity and inclusion, accessibility, mental health, if you have humans that work with you, these are the things that are going to come up, right? And so I see it when it's teams of 4 people. I'm seeing it even with my own team right now, is making sure that we're growing a diverse team. That, you know, we have people bringing in different ideas and perspectives and backgrounds. And it's only me and 3 other people right now. So, yep.
From a culture perspective, I was thinking about this question a lot because I've heard the expression from other business leaders here in the Valley and some of the groups that I'm in on the kind of pendulum swing that we've seen that can happen from, you know, employee well-being, making sure that that was first and foremost for the benefit of the company, the culture, and being effective, but also that pendulum for certain individuals and certain groups has had a counter production on urgency and kind of just maintaining a high performance culture, and accountability, I think, would be the top word Wanted to see if that is something that you were seeing, and the ability, because I just think that my organization, Workiva, has done such a great job of maintaining both and has benefited from the balance of high accountability, productivity, and output, while being a fantastic place to work and where you feel heard and a part of the mission. And so I guess, from your perspective, have you seen that come through with certain organizations where, you know, in the effort to make sure that the workspace is fun, comfortable, and an exciting place to be, that they have had challenges with accountability, production, and being high performing in certain areas of the business?
With this balance with the accountability side and the high performance side, along with what you're saying, like feeling heard and seen and connected, think of it like a relationship, right? If you are in a relationship with this one significant other and they are leaning into you, they ask you how you're doing, they give you the space to say, hey, I'm okay with this, or I'm not okay with this, and you get to be open and you get to be yourself. Well, then what happens when that person needs a little more from you and they need to pull a little from your direction? You are much more willing to provide the help, the support, the love that they need because they've given it to you. And a workspace is no different. For the companies that I've watched, when they truly lean into people are people, right? We're just humans. We're trying to get through this thing called life. Nobody gave us a playbook. I'm sure I left it somewhere. And we're trying to take care of our family, our life, our kids, our parents. We have a job because we need to, right? The reality is we're not all born millionaires. We have to work. And if we can work for a company that leans into us as people, gives us the space to say, hey, Phil, tell me how you feel about this. What do you think about this idea? Stephen, we have this new thing we're going to launch. What are your thoughts? When there's a meeting that needs to happen, hey, what works best for your schedule? Instead of just, hey, it's Wednesday afternoon. And you're like, man, my kiddo gets out early on Wednesdays. How am I going to do this? And then these extra layers of stress. The companies and the leaders that I have seen that have fully embraced supporting their people as people, in the end, they make more money, their people are more productive, they're willing to go above and beyond in those moments where maybe they do need to stay late, maybe we do need to push a deadline. They're more willing to give that because that company has given it to them.
I love it. And it's so consistent with researching your work and what you've put out. It was overlapping in all the conversations, to no surprise that it always often comes back to leadership, right? Pace of the leader, pace of the pack. Or I might be messing that up, but either way, this tone is being set by the owner of the business or the board of the business, the executives at the top. And I would imagine, since I'm not involved in those conversations day in and day out, that it's top of mind these days. And kind of how we started out the conversation, that we didn't talk about it back in the day as being this specific thing to monitor in the business, but that it's constantly, this is our culture, this is what we're trying to set out and achieve. And that's like, I love how that's come up on almost every one of your productions that you put out.
It's so beautiful that it is part of these conversations, that it really is at the forefront. And you see these leaders that when they're paying their staff minimum and trying to extract the maximum, their people are worn out, they're stressed, they're sad, they're not connected. And guess what? They leave. And then you're starting all over, you're recruiting all over, you're paying to retrain somebody. And then you look at these businesses where they're actually leaning into their people and supporting them and looking at it from a people first perspective. And guess what? They're not seeing turnover. They're not seeing people leave. If anything, they're seeing their people go shout from the hilltops, oh my gosh, my company is so great. Come work here. And so then they're that's free marketing right there too, right? And so it is more at the forefront, and it needs to continue to be. We definitely still have some leaders that are set in old ways and have that old school mentality of be there at this time, leave at this time. No, you can't go pick up your kid. These are the hours you're at work. These are the tasks you get done. And I understand there's some jobs that you do need to be at a certain place at a certain time, right? Yeah. The baristas, if they weren't there for me, I think I'd cry.
You can't get your pumpkin spice latte when you want, and it's like game over.
I know. I can't get my... Right. But even like, I think of healthcare, they're having a lot of struggles in the healthcare system. I had some doctor's appointments last week. Guess what? You can't be virtual for all of those. And so this has to continue to be a conversation of how do we improve culture from the perspective of humans as humans, so that when there are those moments of, hey, you got to do this job and you have to have this task done by this task time, they're okay with it because there is more of this give and take and back and forth of energy and support, not just transaction of I'm working for you because I need a job, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Phil can attest to this too. Like Sales 101, when you build relationships, getting to know the person, to know, like, and trust you, they're going to buy products, right? And so when you switch that mindset from I'm talking to a CEO to I'm talking to a person, sales becomes a lot easier to relate. And that works really well with your team. And I've experienced this within our organization is they're not employees. We try to teach intrapreneurship, having the growth mindset of being a business owner, owning your role to crush that role. And then me as a leader to be a resource for them as people. Like if you need to take care of something, take care of it. We're going to be there for you. We're going to back it up. Even as far as resources like, hey, I'm going through something. Who do you know? Because we do a lot of networking. And we know a lot of people here locally. So we're always striving to provide resources to our team. And that goes a long way. Like you said, turnover is very, very expensive. And if you're going to penny pinch on salary and try and get the most you can out of them work-wise, it's very costly to have that turn. You end up spending more money. So I understand startups, and as you grow, and we went through this too, like you have to kind of do a grow with me type thing because salary expense is the biggest expense for most of us. But it is something that to pay attention to on when someone's treated like a human being and like an adult. Sometimes monetary is not like their extreme motivator. They just want to be cared for. They just want to be appreciated. And so it's been eye-opening for us as we've continued to grow our organization. And I think that was something that was learned early on as a salesperson, that we're all just people and we're all on this crazy thing called life where passengers going in a million different directions, and it doesn't matter where you're going as long as it's towards your own perception of success and happiness. And as a leader, I think it's important. So as we wrap up, Kindra, I have to ask you, what is your definition of success?
I knew you were going to ask this question. I think my look at success for myself may also be slightly different when it comes to like success of a business and others. Really, for me, it's been the same since I was training animals, training people. How can I support growth and making a difference and becoming better? It doesn't have to be in something like, running or javelin. I don't have to be, I don't know why javelin was my example. I've never done javelin.
Is there a story there?
In my life. I have done
let's dive into that one.
Maybe it was the chair throwing it was a self-defense mechanism from the Bobby Knight boss.
I have done some weird stuff in my background. Not javelin throwing. Maybe I need to try this now. Anyway.
A new challenge for you, Kindra.
Yes. I say this meaning it's how can we grow in a way that's no longer a competition, right? And I think at the root of the business that I have now, there was a gap in the community, and I was just the one who went, okay, let's fix this and let's fill the need and let's grow this. And it's not in a competitive way. Everybody is winning, right? Stephen, to your question earlier about, do I want to have a couple of really good resources in each category, or do I want to grow more? I want to grow more so that the perfect resource is out there for everybody. So when it comes to me, as far as scale and growth and success, am I making a difference in other people? Am I growing other people? Am I supporting other people? If I'm just in my own little silo and doing my own little grind and not connecting and impacting other people, to me, this whole thing of life would be useless. So
I agree with you there.
that's the success piece.
Well, you are very successful, and I'm excited to partner with you, as you know. I'm glad you two were able to connect and meet. And Phil, we're going to have to plan on the Culture Crush event she's got going on next month. So let the listeners know. Let listeners know where they can, if they want to come to your event next month, how they can do that. And we will be posting this pretty soon, so it'll come out before your event. And also how to follow you, get in contact, and all that good stuff.
Yes. So the event that we have, again, it's really an opportunity for anybody. You don't have to be a leader. You don't have to be an HR or anything like that. It's really an opportunity for anyone to find resources and connect with others. We do them quarterly. So the next one is April 15th with our partners, Goodman's. Again, great example of a company that is really leaning into people, what their people need and what their people want. And so I'm thrilled to have it there. If folks are looking for other resources, that truly is what we are doing, is building a hub of resources. So if you're a company leader, really at any level, and you're maybe pinpointing an area that you need help, or maybe you can't pinpoint the area, but you just know that there's some growth that needs to happen in your culture, that's where we come in. We come in at different levels, whatever's the right fit for your company. We do deep dives, we do assessments. And like I said, we have over 200 partners. So it's not just me coming in and going, hey, here's an area where we need to fix. Well, guess what? I have over 200 partners and best friends that I get to bring along the journey. So we're really tackling it from everybody's specific area of expertise.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a wrap. That's pod. It was nice talking with you, Kindra. Thanks for hopping on.
Thanks, Kindra, so much.
Thank you, guys.